Perfect. Thank you for welcoming us to the conference. My name is Brian Palmeri, and as was shared, we're part of the Going Forward Together team of the Shambhala Meditation Center of Denver. So we'll be sharing just a couple of slides throughout the presentation, but a little bit about our center. We're a meditation center in the Buddhist tradition. And so as was shared before, a lot of folks joined us. We've been around in Denver since around the early 80s, and we're part of a larger Shambhala organization that's been around since around the 70s. The title of our presentation, A Spiritual Community's Journey with Sociocracy. We chose spiritual community, but really we identify as a meditation center. And so, as was shared, we don't live together. We're not in a co-housing facility or whatnot, but we practice meditation and have classes for ourselves and other members of our community available online as well as in person at our location in Denver, Colorado, in the United States. So grateful to be here with everybody. A little bit about what four of us are going to speak throughout the presentation. And so we'll be kind of back and forth as for who's presenting. And then at the end, we'll be asking folks to share sort of what resonated with them and sort of thoughts that you might have around strategy that you've used to work through some of the obstacles and the challenges that we're presenting on. So I'm going to start sharing our title screen here and just pass it to the rest of our speakers to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about what we're going to share today. So maybe I'll pass to Juliette next.
So should I dive right in?
Just introduce yourself and share if you have anything more to add about this, the title.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm Juliette Banerjee. I've been part of the Shambhala Meditation Center of Denver for maybe 5 or 6 years, and the last couple of years have been the transition to Sociocracy, and I've been very eagerly involved in that activity. Yeah, I'm on a few different circles that we call teams. Yeah, I don't have much more to add. Thank you.
Great, maybe we can hear from Fred.
Yeah, I'm Fred Jaben, and I've been meditating with the center since 1998. And I was director of the center for many years, and so I'm very familiar with our conventional hierarchical model we used to use. And I'm very excited that for the last few years, we've been transitioning into the sociocracy model. And that's what the presentation is about today, what some of the successes are and what some of the obstacles have been for us.
Kathy? Thanks. Kathy?
I'm Kathy Mitchell-Garton. I have been involved with with Shambhala for almost 20 years, and more specifically with the Denver Center for about 5 or 6 years. And I'm currently leading the circle that works on we call practice and education. So what meditation offerings we're giving and what kinds of classes we're offering. So that's kind of my niche in this group.
Perfect, thanks. So as we mentioned, we'll be kind of going through here's sort of our agenda. We only have very few slides, so we'll be referencing this a couple of times throughout. But the first thing we're going to kind of walk into is a short video about 1.5 minutes long, creating an analogy around a bicycle that Fred will introduce us to. Then the main chunk of our presentations around mental shifts that we're working through. And so our center adopted Sociocracy 2 years ago, this past April. And that was right after sort of researching different democratically led distributed leadership models. So we've had 2 years of experience of sort of trying to implement Sociocracy while we learn about it. And we have our own flavor of Sociocracy at this point of things that we've implemented, and then there's other things we just know we haven't gotten to yet. So we'll sort of talk through the mental shifts that we're working through, and then how we've sort of strategized or activities we've done to sort of work through those mental shifts. And then the last piece is a share out where we want to know which of those sort of mental obstacles you all have worked through, and strategies you've used to work through them. So there'll be an opportunity towards the end of this session to share your experience around this. So that's what we're in for. So we're grateful that you're interested in this. So I'm just going to stop sharing now for a second and yeah, go from there. So as we think through it, we're just going to kind of get through to our first video, which is about, like I say, about a minute and a half. And it maybe, Fred, if you can introduce the video and tell us a little bit about what we're going to see, and let me know when you're ready to start.
Well, when we see the video, we'll be seeing a person learning to ride a really odd bicycle, and how his mind, his neural pathways in his brain gets very used to riding this odd bicycle, and then he switches to a normal bicycle, and you'll see what happens. But the video is to illustrate how our minds get really fixed on something, such as working in a conventional hierarchical governance structure, and then also how it can relearn, and that it takes a little time to relearn, but once you do relearn, then you feel some confidence in the new way of doing things. So I think that's all the introduction that's needed, and we can go ahead with the video.
Okay, like I say, about 2 minutes long. It's in English, and we'll go from there.
So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm going to see if somebody brings a bicycle, and I'm going to try to ride a normal bike. It's backwards, it's backwards. This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but in this moment I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that all I proved is that I could only redesignate that bias.
So I hope you enjoyed it. I saw this before, but I enjoyed seeing it again. So you saw the first bike, when he turned right, the bike went left. When he turned left, the bike went right. But he got used to riding that. And when he got used to riding that, it became second nature to him. And then he couldn't ride the normal bike. And this illustrates some of the mental shifts that we have to go through, and we had to go through and are going through, to shift from the more conventional hierarchical model of governance into the sociocracy model. And at first, it was very awkward and didn't seem natural to us. And so, just like riding a bike, you need some training wheels at the beginning, or someone to hold you and help you ride. And then once your mental pathways can shift a little bit and you get used to it, then you gain more confidence and you can ride more independently and more naturally. And so we're at the point where we can do some of that, although we still have some remnants of training wheels that stick with us as we go through. But we're looking forward to when we really get the hang of it. And then just like a bicycle, when you do get the hang of it, then it comes as second nature and you can just jump on and ride. And so we're approaching that point. I don't know how many blocks or miles we have to go to get there, but we can see the horizon somewhere in the future. So anybody else have anything to contribute to that from our team or from anybody who's on this that's those in your little squares? Kathy.
I was just going to tie it back to some of the practices that we do at our meditation center. So as we're meditating, and we really work to just notice what's happening in our minds, and that helps us see what habits are there. And then once we're able to notice the habits that we've formed, we're more able to make those shifts. And I've realized that transitioning to sociocracy has been like kind of like this meditation process as a group, as a collective. So we're trying to make this shift, but not just individually. Now we're trying to do it as a group, and so it's an interesting connection to the practices that we use in our spiritual work or practice. So I just wanted to add that little piece.
Good, thank you. Anyone else?
I see Flora.
Yes, I'm just wondering, you said you were doing this in a group. I was just wondering if there was some, one of the most like commonly observed habits that needed to be broken that you felt like you guys had in common. Check.
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna, unless maybe I misunderstand it, but that's what we're gonna walk through now is sort of the mental shifts that we've worked through. So that's the next part of our presentation, yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in here and say that, someone who's always been kind of a social activist and, wanting to kind of push boundaries and, rethink how things can be done for more inclusion and more success and more justice. It's really surprising that hierarchy is one of those mental habits that you can, without full awareness, just find yourself slipping back into, or finding that there's some comfort in it because we've been so acculturated to structures that are hierarchical. And so it's kind of, as Kathy was saying, it's a continuous process of recognizing when that kind of mindset creeps back in, and then kind of breaking free. And that I think shows up in things like ideas about what leadership looks like, what participation looks like, ways of getting things done. And yeah, so we could probably explore those three areas if anyone wants to jump in. But yeah, the notion of leadership and participation, really we've had to kind of grapple with both as a group and in terms of as individuals.
Yeah, so Juliette, do you want to jump into our first one then with a little bit more first or second of the specific mental shifts that we're working through?
Yeah,
that's a great introduction. Yeah.
That's what I that's what I was sharing. Let's see. Well, habits such as in terms of participation, normally there's a select few that are either in leadership or a select few that are getting things done. And so the habit of, oh, someone else will take care of it, some activity that needs to be done, or maybe a problem that you notice, but within, and I'm talking we basically run a meditation center. We run programs, so there's facilities maintenance, there's programs. And so the habit of thinking, oh, someone else will take care of it, and just not used to, responsibility falling on, everyone equally. So that's one thing. Does anyone want to share others? Yeah.
I think the idea of leadership and who is the leader has been challenging. We were having a conversation yesterday with some people from the Shambhala International group. They're meeting actually here in the at a retreat center, and so we were kind of sharing our experience with sociocracy, and there was someone said there's no one's in charge, and that was like a big sort of knee-jerk reaction, like, oh my God, well, how do you get anything done, and how do you decide who's going to do what, and all of that. And so we talked more about how leadership sort of arises in sociocracy, but that initial, like, no one's actually in charge, just meaning that no one's like over everything, is a big leap for a lot of us, I think.
I think also that when people participate in different committees and different task groups and things like that, not only is there the inclination to leave it to others sometimes, even though you might voice your opinion, but since we started with our sociocracy circles, it's more than an opinion. It's each person has power in that situation. They have power because they can object to a proposal based on the aim of the proposal, and their objection has to be considered and resolved before the proposal can go into action. So there's much more responsibility for each individual in that situation because they have that power, and that's something that we're not used to. And so not only does each person have to work with the mindset of member versus leader, but has to work with the mindset of I'm responsible because I can really contribute to the success or the failure of this particular proposal that's going around. I can help make it better. I can help make our decisions better. I can help make our decisions more accurate. And if each person takes on that responsibility in the group, then you can come out with some terrifically more successful decisions that will be more successful when they hit the ground. So I think that's something that's really been noticeable for me as we are changing our bicycle and going through this process of transitioning.
I'll piggyback on that. The concept of decision making. So we have a lot of meetings, some in person, a lot of Zoom meetings, and I think in previous structures, it's basically the loudest voice or the usual person who is comfortable and confident sharing their ideas or kind of nudging an idea forward, and others, this is the previous mindset. Others are happy, sometimes happy to just sit back and, okay, we trust this person, they probably have a good idea, let them nudge it forward. But with sociocracy, everyone's voice matters is required really to push a proposal forward. And so just that the concept of remembering to utilize rounds to get those to get the proposal crafted to the best extent possible. I think that it's one of those things that sometimes we forget to use rounds. And yes, the loudest voice still sometimes prevails. And it's, sometimes more efficient to just let that decision go forward without taking the time to ask each individual, are there any objections, etc. So that's a decision-making, I think, is one of those sticky transitions.
Yeah, I would add we've gone a little farther with even thinking about the language we use. So, some of the mental shifts we're sort of talking about, and they're sort of going back and forth between a few, but Juliette was talking about the desire to hang on to some forms of hierarchy, like as we're even transitioning into sociocracy, these sort of old habits are coming back. People are not used to participating. They're used to kind of going to a meeting and sitting there, or knowing that they can be informed about a decision, but they're not the decision maker. And so that transition has had an impact. The third sort of mental shift we're talking about here is that I'm not a leader, I'm a member. And so with that mental shift, we're kind of thinking around, we almost are changing our language to ask people, we don't want you to lead this group. We want you to either coordinate it or be part of a team where it's shared power, as Fred was saying. And so that mental shift from saying, I'm in a group role, but I am a leader within that circle. And so that's been sort of a mental shift we're working through. And then as Juliette was saying, sort of our fourth mental shift is about remembering how great rounds are, right? Sometimes we're falling into the old habit during a meeting structure where we're just listening to the person with the loudest voice or the person who's speaking up, and forgetting to reach out to the person who hasn't spoken, or maybe just is a little bit more thoughtful before speaking up, or uses the chat as opposed to raising a digital hand or a real hand. So that fourth one around remembering that a new process takes time. And I offered to speak to this one because I really remember the very first time we were doing a round and how it just sort of stopped the meeting. We really spent probably 20 minutes trying to work through a proposal and doing the series of rounds, and kind of not realizing that we needed to really wordsmith the proposal before we got into the process of rounds. And so remembering that at the beginning, it's clunky and awkward. And then as you use it more and more, it becomes smoother. But then also, and I've heard Ted say this, and we just reiterated it yesterday in our group conversation of, once you start using rounds or work within a sociocracy system, you sort of miss it and get frustrated when you're not working in that system. And so when folks who are not used to speaking up and you see people who are not participating in a meeting, you try to call them out and say, like, please join us. What are you thinking about this? And it might feel awkward. Or if folks are just kind of assuming somebody else is going to make the decision, the round really is a nice equalizer, and you miss it if it's not there.
So I'm wondering, I don't know what the background of everyone on this in this class, this session is. So does everybody understand what we're talking about, rounds, and we talk about these techniques? If you don't, raise your hand and we'll go into more explanation. Good, everybody seems to know that, so that's great. We can go on then.
Perfect. And then our last sort of mental shift, and then we're going to open it up to that conversation. Kathy, would you be willing to speak to a little bit about the aim and domain as a tool?
Yeah, so it took us a while to work through our aims and domains in the different circles at our center, and I work specifically with what we call practice and education. So we're kind of the programming team or circle, which is a little bit more straightforward. than some of our other groups, but it was still challenging to work through the domain. And then to get used to being able to make decisions within our domain. So we think, oh, let's put on a class, but don't we need to talk to somebody else and have somebody else approve it? And getting used to, no, actually we can approve it. And then the other piece of that is there are other teams or circles that we actually need to work with. And so working through that communication piece of how do we connect with, that it needs to get on the website and we need to do some, communications around it. We need to get the word out, and we need to talk with the people who are making announcements and all these little pieces. So we get to make the decision, but then there's all these other groups that we're going to need to work with to get what we're working on done. That was one piece that was challenging. And then sort of understanding our domain and staying in there. So there's the being able to make the decisions, but then not being able to make decisions for other circles. So we had a conversation around creating more revenue because our financial situation was a little challenging. And so we had a conversation about what we could do as a programming team to create revenue. And there were some suggestions around, well, let's try to get more members. Let's increase our donations, which are great ideas and not programming ideas. So we had to say, okay, and kind of remember, okay, what is our domain? Not membership. So let's maybe offer that as an idea to the membership circle. Rather than trying to take it on and hash it out and how would it work and all of that stuff. No, that's not ours. So let's back off from that. And then trusting those other circles to actually take on whatever they're doing and not trying to, stick our nose in places that. So it's been a really interesting sort of dance of getting to know what our piece of the pie is, and then trusting other people to take on what their pieces of the pie are.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mental shifts that have to be made in our situation certainly was the level of trust. So it's not only a mental shift, it's a gut shift, it's a heart shift too, to be able to trust other circles and let them make autonomous decisions within their domain, because that's so different than how we were all raised and how we were all participated in organizations as we were coming up. So that's still an ongoing situation. Instead, we have the circle, which is sometimes called the general circle, I believe, within Sociocracy, with representatives from each circle, and we keep calling it a lead circle. And it's a little bit confusing because we mean that there's a lead from each circle representing that circle, but it has the connotation that there's some circle that leads the other circles. And so we're probably going to have to change the name of that circle at some time. But the level of trust is building. It's like it's so interesting. It's like, letting go and being a tightrope walker without a net. You have to trust that the other circles are going to take care of something that you're concerned about. That's their domain. So that's been one of the, and still ongoing, things that we're living through and working with.
I believe Fred shared it or spoke of it perfectly, but I want to emphasize the notion of the general circle and the idea, both within and around the organization, that is a circle above, and that is, you know, kind of mini hierarchy. I really feel that, you know, both the name is misleading, but also the mentality is, okay, you know, we're gathering together, active members, and then taking on other kind of overarching issues or problems. And it's just really comfortable and easy to think of that kind of, well, this is like an executive committee that is above, rather than just a representation and communication hub. Friends, did you want to?
Yes, I sense an aversion against hierarchy and leadership. I think what is healthy is that there shouldn't be a hierarchy of people, but a hierarchy of purposes is necessary. Some purposes are higher than others, and some purposes need to be agreed on before others. It doesn't make much sense to make some of the practical decisions when the long-term decisions haven't been made. And I think that this is something I see in Denmark, at least, that many of the sociocratic organizations, they are imagining that they don't need leadership. The thing of somebody taking care that the thing is actually moving. People dive into their local circles and they're working there and they're doing whatever they want, but nobody's leading the circles and nobody's leading the circles of the circles, and it's actually not going anywhere. And this thing that at least one person needs to be able to facilitate, one person needs to be able to be secretary, and one person needs to be able to have an idea of whether we are moving somewhere. If there's nobody doing it, then it's not happening.
Yeah,
And
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Franz. Yeah, great
Right.
explanation.
that
Pastor
I
Flynn.
think we're hoping, and it's been carried out so far, that the general circle, in our case we call it lead circle, provides a lot of that function, since it has representatives from all the different circles. It looks at the responsibility of setting a view for where we're going, and looks at the responsibility to see that if there are any gaps in the means to get to that outcome, and if there are overlaps between the different circles that need to be clarified.
mm,
I think that function that you mentioned is absolutely essential. And then I think the question is, how is it provided? How is that function provided? Is it the individuals, or can it be a group working together?
yes, and what I think is that what I see in Denmark is that people want it to be the group, and they sort of shy away from any individual leadership. And the thing is that if nobody is actually understanding it, then the group is not doing it either, because it will happen if it will be learned by role modeling. This is how humans learn things. So if everybody has this shying away from stepping up and saying, I suggest we go this way, and does anybody have an objection? Then we end up having these passive organizations that are falling apart. And we have a lot of them in Denmark. We used to have a lot of good organizations.
I think stepping up and taking that responsibility is, as you say, absolutely vital. And I see it happen more and more in our organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, good. Well, maybe I'll introduce the sort of next phase, because I think we're going to ask for more folks to contribute and keep it going. So thanks, Franz, for getting us going on that area. So I'm going to screen share one more time here to kind of remind folks of where we are with our agenda and where we're headed next. So with our agenda, right? So we sort of talked through these 5 mental shifts that I added to the chat. And so now we're kind of talking a little bit about strategies for action. And so we'll share a few strategies for action that we've used And then we're going to kind of open it up for the rest of our presentation time to share out, just like Franz is doing, sort of what has been your experience and what strategies for action you have used. So just to move us in that direction, I'll just share some of the strategies that we have used, is recognizing that we just have to be patient. There's a natural ebb and flow, not only of energy, but of ideas. And we've had times where we've hit plateaus where we just kind of are in the flow of it, but it's not a real growth phase. And we're not going backwards either, but we're just sort of in a plateau period. And then we have other times where we're really feeling like we're growing and taking on new things on a regular basis. So recognizing that and not always be trying to grow has been one of the strategies that we've recognized and used. We also felt that it was important to kind of maintain an understanding of self-improvement. So, we researched Sociocracy and a number of other platforms as well before we adopted Sociocracy. And so we continue to sort of present to our Sangha, our community, saying that we're not the experts, we don't have this all put together, and we're constantly learning along the way. And that sort of perspective matches up well with, our meditation practice, but also it allows things to not solidify where we have to do it a certain way just because we have done it that way in the past. So that's been a great strategy for us. The third is consistently reviewing the Sociocracy tools and processes. So as I mentioned, it's very easy for us in meetings to slip into not using a round, and then we're reminded of how well it really works. So if we're consistently checking out websites and trying new approaches to things, or just remembering to use the approaches we know about, that's been a good strategy for us as well. And then the fourth is continuing to stretch through awkwardness. And so again, there's things that come up, whether it's, a personality thing within a group or a skill set, either missing or really prevalent within a group, or tendencies and habits that are coming out after you start working with a group for a long period of time, but continuing to stretch and grow through those awkward moments, or not even moments, they could be longer than that. Those are some of the strategies we've been able to work through. And so as we move into opening up the mics and sort of hearing what people's sort of what sort of resonated with them about the struggles that we've had, as well as the strategies we've tried, I just want to remind folks about sort of the ground rules, which are sort of assumed in this conference, but we are in a learning environment. So not judging anybody around what they have to say, remembering to step forward and step back, meaning if you've already shared, try not to monopolize the conversation and leave space for others, and be respectful of everybody and in speaking slowly, as English is not everyone's first language. So with those being said, I'm just going to put a QR code on the screen. This is not instead of discussing things right here. We really want the majority of our conversation to be happening right now. But if you're somebody who likes to think about stuff and sort of respond later, we'd love to hear how this resonated with you. And there's a survey series of questions there that will walk you through the same questions we're going to discuss right now. So how have the mental shifts that we've talked about impacted you? What's been your experience around that? And then what strategies have you used to work through them? So you're welcome to use the QR code or the tiny URL on the screen. I'm going to pull it down here in just a minute. But again, we're trying to hold a conversation now around what's been your experience and what's worked well in the groups that you've been a part of. So go ahead and just raise your hand and such, and we'll go from there. I'm just going to catch up on the chat while I see if anyone raises their hand. We'll just call on you. If you raise a digital hand or a physical hand, we'll look for you.
This is where we have to exercise patience, waiting for people to raise their hands.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mark is. You're muted, Mark.
Okay, there we go. Hi. I'm really interested in how you guys are working with your structure of sociocracy in context to the greater structure of the Tibetan hierarchy, which is quite radically different than sort of the decision-making process that you guys are making. That's the first part of my question. And the second part of my question really has to do with, your organization in general and its history in context to, what happened in the 80s with the Vajra Regent and the conduct of the board at that time, and how you guys work with that as an energetic configuration in context to your model, in context to your center, and in context to, the really deep shadow side that's been part of the Tibetan Buddhist community. And I mean, this is a lot. You can just answer it any way you want, or ignore half of it, or whatever, because these are really big questions. But and then how you work with our shadow elements in your community, and then there's another thing, just a side thing when you showed that thing, this notion of a higher level. Why do you guys talk about higher instead of awareness, which has no level or higher or lower? It's just about awareness. So you can pick any of those. I'm just interested in your understanding or observations or thoughts about some of the questions or issues that I'm raising here. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to address the shadow part first, what you're talking about, because there's been more shadows than in the 80s. There's been more recent shadows than in the 80s for us. And I think we feel that the best way to work with shadows is to shine light on it. And so we're being very open and transparent about these things that have happened, and offering many community dialogues when necessary to work through these so that everybody can express their voice. And we've lost membership because of some of the shadows over time and so on. But being very open and transparent, I think, is really very, very important. In terms of the Tibetan, how sociocracy fits into the Tibetan model, which I'm taking that you feel is very hierarchical, or can be interpreted that way, because usually you have a teacher who makes the decision, you follow the decision. In the Shambhala International Network, that's not true. Each center is giving a lot of autonomy and working through the metals. And then Chogyam Trungpa, who is the founder of Shambhala in general, had the concept of natural hierarchy. And he may have meant it one way. I'm not sure all the time if I understand what he meant. But I feel that natural hierarchy arises within our sociocratic model all the time. That people and as people take on responsibility and step forward based on their interests, skill levels, and appropriate timing all the time. And so that leadership shifts constantly. And we're all leaders, and sometimes one's leadership comes to the fore at certain times, and other times other people's leadership come to the fore. So I don't see any great contrast with our original teachings of natural hierarchy, and other people might want to comment on some of the other aspects or on these of what you asked.
I just was going to jump in and say that since the Sakyong is no longer the head of Shambhala International, we don't have that same kind of connection with the teacher and the teachings coming down from that one person. And so it's really created a lot of space and necessity for the whole of Shambhala to re-evaluate how we're working, and this the people from the Shambhala board, Shambhala International Board, who were visiting yesterday, were actually curious about sociocracy, because I think there is a lot of emphasis on like Fred said, transparency, trying to include more voices, and so it's a huge shift, and it's I think in Buddhist terms it's a shift towards Sangha being the ground of our teaching, and where we are finding sort of the base of what we're working with now is more Sangha rather than
Sangha meaning practice community.
Sangha means community, spiritual community. So that's kind of where the wisdom is coming from, I think. And so we're trying to figure out how to create the structures that will work with that. But I'll stop talking because I'd like.
I'll just say, in reference to that question, we're distinguishing our governing model, as in just practical earthly concerns of running a center, as you know, we've removed the hierarchy from that. However, in terms of the spiritual practices or you know, teachers, we still have a hierarchy of you know, seniority of teachers versus meditation instructors versus just you know the you know average practitioner. So there is kind of a hierarchy of, I mean, this would be controversial, but hierarchy of knowledge and experience with the teachings. So that still remains and is respected. But we're speaking specifically with governance and how we run things on a food plan.
Yeah, thank you. Good
Yeah.
point.
So I see Mark's hand, but we're running out of time here, so we're gonna transition to our thank yous, and Mark will put that
Sorry, I
QR
didn't mean
code.
I'll lower it. Sorry.
Okay. We'll put that QR code on the screen again here. So Frank, if you or Fred, if you want to start us off with our thank yous, this way we can wrap up on time.
Thanks for SOFA, first of all, to give us this opportunity, and thanks for everybody who's attending this session. Appreciate it very much. I hope you will respond to the QR code. And there's a metaphor in Buddhist teachings that applies to what we're trying to do in our transition of governance, and that is the metaphor of playing a lute, or today maybe a guitar. That you tighten the strings too much, that's not going to be sounding very well. If you leave them too loose, that's not going to be sounding too well. So not too tight, not too loose is a good dictum to try to follow. If you get too tight in our center with trying to implement the elements of sociocracy in a very tight and way, then that makes it more difficult for people to shift. There's more rebelling against the transition. If you get too loose, then you don't sharpen up and begin to use the elements in the way that can create the best performance and everything. So that's all I have to say, and I just wish everybody well in your organizations working, and I feel very fortunate that we can be part of this larger SOFA community. It's been great for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Flora. Thank you for all the participants.
Oh, excellent. Thank you to everybody here today and our presenters, Brian, Julia, Kathy, and Fred. I hope that's correct. It was wonderful to see everybody. Sociocracy for All would like to remind you that if you would like to make a donation to Sociocracy for All, you can visit our donation page, and the link is in the chat. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and we encourage you to write any appreciations or learnings that you would like in the chat as well. And I'll see you at the next lecture, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.